Well, good evening, Spokane Public Schools families. We appreciate you joining us this evening. My name is Adam Swinyard, and I'm the superintendent for the district. And the purpose of tonight's webinar is to provide an update and share information about the phasing of our 5th and 6th grade students back to in-person instruction in our schools. I'm going to start this evening by introducing our panel of district staff that are going to be participating in the presentation tonight. So we have with us Dr. Mark Anderson. It's been our longtime associate superintendent for the district. We have Heather Bybee. She is our chief academic officer. We have Clint Price. He's the executive director for elementary schools. Gwen Harris, executive director for elementary schools and option programming. We have Becky Ramsey. She is our Director of Special Education Services. Becky Dowdy. She is our Director of Health Services. Sandra Gerard, who is our Director of Communication. So tonight we're going to provide a brief presentation on our phasing plan for 5th and 6th grade, and then we will do the best we can to answer as many questions that you might have. We have almost 1,000 people in attendance this evening, so we'll get through as many questions as we can and then continue to provide information on our website as well as social media and through direct email communication. And before we jump in, I'm going to talk a little bit about where we've been and where we're headed with our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this has certainly been an incredibly challenging year for our families, for our students, for our staff. And there have been no easy answers from the moment in March where we were directed to close our schools by the governor, and we had to pivot virtually overnight to an online environment. And then as we moved into the summer, into the unknown of what the months ahead would look like, we had a group of over 150 staff members, parents, community members, educational experts that participated on a task force led by Dr. Anderson to plan out what this year would look like in terms of having an online experience and a hybrid experience. And you're going to hear those details tonight. And throughout this process, we have heard from members of the community and parents that really feel like our schools should be open. And we've heard from members of our community that feels like our schools should be closed. And there has certainly been a wide range of opinions really since the beginning of the pandemic, and that's continued through even this current moment. And as we were planning in the summer, one of the things that our district leadership and school board members did was to reflect back on how have we operated our school district. Knowing there was an agreement between open school advocates and closed school advocates, how should we operate Spokane Public Schools in a pandemic? And that decision making involved looking back of how have we always addressed topics of public health and safety. And our district has always followed the guidance of public health officials. And in fact, in any typical school day, Spokane Public Schools is following literally hundreds of guidelines and regulations from our public health entities that directly oversee Spokane County, which is the Washington State Department of Health and the Spokane Regional Health District. And the decision was made to not start picking and choosing what health guidelines to follow. And in fact, we should continue and be steadfast in walking step by step with our health officials and taking their guidance on when and how we should return and reopen our schools. There has times that decision has angered open school advocates that we are following guidance of public health officials. And there's times that has angered closed school advocates that we're following the guidelines of public health officials. And we recognize that there's been a varying opinions, and we recognize there hasn't been agreement along the way. And our approach has been and will continue to be to walk step by step with our health officials and take their guidance in how we operate our schools. We were directed in the summer months to begin the year in a distance learning environment by our regional health district. We complied with that recommendation, and we've maintained in close communication with them and have watched very closely the effectiveness of the mitigation strategies that have been outlined for us, such as social distancing. You'll hear about that tonight, wearing a mask, aggressively quarantining, and robustly making sure that there is fidelity to those guidelines that have been provided to us by the OSPI, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, and the Washington State Department of Health. And we started in September with small groups of students attending, students that are receiving special education services, students in our English language development programs. And our goal has always been to return kids as quickly as possible. And we've maintained those conversations with our health officials. And we brought kindergartners back on October 9th, and then have continued bringing students back as our health officials have given us the support to do that. And throughout that period of time, we have seen a very low occurrence of transmission and COVID inside of our schools. That reflects both state and national trends, that when in fact you follow the mitigation strategies, that transmission inside of our schools is in fact very rare, and that's what we have seen in Spokane Public Schools. So that's been our decision-making approach through this process, and that's what has brought us here to this evening of on the verge of bringing our 5th and 6th grade students back to in-person instruction. A couple of things that you'll hear tonight that have been very frequently asked questions over the last several weeks as we have shared more and communicated more about 5th and 6th grade returning. One is, why is my student going to be going every other day? We're going to be talking about that tonight. We're going to be participating on what we're calling a hybrid model. And the purpose of that is we'll have approximately half the students attending in those grade levels at any one time. And the rationale for that is in order to meet the social distancing guidelines, the state requires us to have 6 feet of social distancing between those students when they're in their desks. And in order for us to meet that requirement, we don't have enough classrooms to lower class sizes to that number. We've done that in K4. We've lowered class sizes in K4 in order to have enough students based on the square footage of those classrooms in order to maintain that social distancing. There isn't enough rooms at the elementary level in order to lower the 5th and 6th grade classrooms to that number in order to get the entire class in there at one time. And so that is the rationale for that hybrid model. And that is indicative of what you're seeing in many other school districts across the state. The other thing you're going to hear tonight is, will my students be able to participate in live instruction when they're in person and live instruction when they're at home on their virtual days? And so you're going to hear a lot about that decision, the rationale for our approach, and some of the research that has gone in to that decision. As I said, we know you're going to have questions. We'll answer as many of those as we can along the way, both verbally and in written response, and then we'll follow up as best we can afterwards. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Anderson. He's going to bring up a brief presentation, and then we'll move forward with our panel of experts.
Well, thank you, Dr. Swinyard, and joining us this evening among not only our panelists, but we appreciate having Ashley and Zach as our interpreters for our hard of hearing community. And with that, do feel free to put into the chat questions. You may want to wait for a bit to see if we answer them as we go along. Heather Bybee, our Chief Academic Officer, she will be our moderator at the end of this short presentation, and kind of direct questions that you might have to various panel members. We are recording this webinar, so we will be sending it out again so that you have a chance to see us. You met the panelists. Dr. Swinyard introduced them. So with that, tonight we're going to give you an overview of our reopening plan. And Dr. Swinyard mentioned we've had several task groups working to put our plan together. We had a Safety and Operations Committee. Each of these committees had between 20 and 30 staff, administrators, parents, community members serving on these committees. So Safety and Operations is a committee that has continued to meet and operate even after the plan was developed, as we get each grade level to come back. So they prepared for tonight and for this next week as your 5th and 6th grade children will come back. We've had an Elementary Educational Model Committee, Secondary Special Education Committee, English Language Development Committee, Intervention Services, Technology, Full Distance Learning Option, that's our Spokane Virtual Academy, as well as an extracurricular activities. And our secondary schools, under the governor's guidance, started practice today with our high school volleyball. So that is part of that reopening plan. with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather to talk about the schedule that your students will be on starting next week.
All right, thank you, Dr. Anderson. So as Dr. Swinyard mentioned, we're calling this a hybrid. So it's a rotational model that will kind of carry us through this phase of instruction. And that means students will attend 5 of every 10 days of live instruction on an A-B model with alternating Fridays. So your students will be assigned Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and every other Friday. In that model, students will receive a full day's worth of instruction in all of the core classes. It's important to note that we did a lot of work around the best model for hybrid, as I know questions have surfaced about turning cameras on and can we stream live instruction while the students are there in person? And all of the research has shown that that's not good practice, that kids fall behind on both sides, the kids behind the camera and the kids in the classroom, because the attention is being divided. And that teachers are really able to attend to the needs of the students in front of them in this model, and also extend the learning for the students who are working remotely that day. And so we're really confident in the model we have. We plan to partner with our teachers and our families to support that, because a lot of it is going to be around time management. And how do we support our kids with time management? In teaching, we kind of call it the I do, we do, you do model. Like that's kind of what instruction is. Let me introduce a topic, let's work on it together. And then here's the part where I need you to work independently. And often in a typical school day, we would do that 5 or 6 times in a day, where you kind of break your lesson out. And so now we're doing those portions and then asking the independent work to be done at home. So did you want to add to that, Adam?
Oh, I was just going to say that, sorry about that, Heather. I was just going to say that the idea of having kids be in person and then being live, beaming in from home, kind of at first thought, that just kind of seems to make the most sense. And, as we planned, that was one of our first initial impressions of, well, you know what, it just makes sense. You have the technology. Why wouldn't you turn the camera on? Why wouldn't you have the kids from home live so that they can be there virtually in the moment? And what was really interesting is as we engaged those educational experts, as we looked at some of the research that was emerging, as Heather mentioned, what we learned is teachers are actually able to get through more content when they're able to focus on the kids that are in front of them. And then the kids that are home virtually, they're able to have assigned tasks and work through it. There'll be a portion of each day where they can have a check-in with that teacher. But we understand that, again, just that initial first impression is, well, that just seems the most logical to have them live. I even know when I shared this with my own spouse, it was like, are you kidding me? Why wouldn't you just have them log in and be live? And really, we've been committed in all things we do to really looking at best practice, looking at what the research says. And in fact, the state of Texas started out with their entire state doing live virtually and in person at the same time. And due to the amount of trouble they had with that model, they shifted their entire state to a hybrid that looks similar to what we're doing. So that's the entire state of Texas. And we've also heard at other states where they started out trying to do live and virtually and in person at the same time. And they had so many challenges with it, they ended up just having everybody be in a virtual environment, whether you were in the classroom or in a Zoom. So again, we feel confident that this is the right model for our kids. We understand that it's going to create a little bit of wondering, and it might not be what our first impressions would be of what it's going to look like. But that planning, we feel, is going to put our kids and our staffs in the best position to be successful.
And Heather, I understand that on the day that the student is not at school, at their virtual day, if working families are uncomfortable leaving their 5th or 6th grader home, that we are offering that day camp option so that parents could sign up. And I think that's at Salk Middle School, Rogers High School, and the old Jefferson Elementary up on the South Hill, so that we would have staff there helping kids stay connected to their online day. Is that?
Yes. Yep. And I know for me, when I when we were in these conversations in the summer, I was most worried, just thinking through my own brain, how am I going to keep my calendar straight? And so these are the things that will be coming. Calendars will be made available. So we will email them and embed them where all the days will be labeled. They'll be available on the district website, and they'll be embedded in the kids' teams' calendars so that they're always there. The AB calendar will be the same AB calendar you're going to see at middle school and high school. It's not that the kids will all be on a different set of rotation. The rotation will be universal. So if you have not yet been reached out to with your designation, it's coming. In terms of the day, as we said, the drop-off will be just as it was with our K-4 students, kind of in that window, 8:15 to 8:30. And we try and keep it tight just so that we don't have kids without supervision mixing. As we've mentioned before, cohorting is super important. Instruction will take place 8:30 to 2:25, and then 2:25 is student pickup time. And that 2:25 to 3 o'clock, that's the time where the teachers, the classroom teachers, will be available to support students who are at home. So if your child got hung up on a math problem, or they were curious about a book they were reading, what the ask was, they will have time every day. So just think about it. If you're a 5th grade teacher, that's time for your 10 or 12 kids that will be home that day. It'll specifically be to address their needs and where they got hung up. So when they show up to school the next day, they're ready to go and feel confident about what they've done. We're going to continue to serve breakfast and lunch in the classroom. So far, so good. Actually, lots of our teachers want us to keep doing lunch in the classroom. So that's been one of those unforeseen positive surprises that we've seen. In terms of instruction, like I said, students will still have music, PE, art, and science. For the 6th grade families out there, we know band, strings, and art is a unique offering that we have for our 6th grade students. So it's going to look a little different during the day because Department of Health regulations right now limit instrumentation and singing. And so students will have an arts experience at 6th grade, but we're opening virtual clubs for all of our instrumental families to continue learning and growing with their favorite instruments. And so information on that will be coming out tomorrow from your band and strings and art teachers. Again, throughout the day, there'll be regular mask breaks and recess time. The schools have gotten really good at it. And so the toughest part is always just finding the right space as we bring more and more kids back, but we're confident in our plan. Support staff is there and has been there. So our administrators, our counselors, our MTSS and intervention teachers, office staff, everyone's going to be there to welcome your child and help them with the transition. Because what we know is as children mature, their awareness for the world is also growing. And so we want to make sure that we're there to attend to their anxieties and fears because we know that they might be more cognizant of this being different. And in terms of that, we use instructional strategies that are going to optimize the in-person. It is how can I move your student and give them what they need so that they feel good tomorrow when they're working from home. There's been a lot of work done around that, and we will continue to do work with that so that both you and your student feel good about the progress.
So one of the areas that's probably we've been successful at, but we've been very, very diligent in following the health department's guidance when it comes to safety and health practices and making sure our students are wearing masks, that they're socially distanced, that they are practicing good hygiene, and that they come to school healthy and are not coming to school sick. So I'm going to ask Becky Dowdy, who's our Director of Health Services, to share with you what we're looking for to make sure that students, when they come to school, are not showing any signs of being sick or having COVID. And then we'll talk about a tool that we've developed that we'll want parents to help us every day. Tell us about your child's health. So Becky?
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. So we really just want to make sure that when staff and students are in our buildings, that they are well. And As everybody here knows, the list of symptoms related to COVID is long, and we do know that it's very similar to a lot of other viruses that circulate normally this time of year, but we're really looking for those classic symptoms of COVID. So a cough, shortness of breath, a fever, just feeling generally unwell. We want to make sure that we screen that out before the students come to school. And we didn't want to do that at the door and line up all of the kids and have to screen them that way. So our tech department did a really great job of coming up with an app that families can use. And I know that Dr. Anderson is going to share that.
So we will be sending home to you after the meeting tonight a little video about how this health check app works. It's very easy. All of our employees have been using it, and then our families in kindergarten through fourth grade have been using it now for several months, and it's very easy to use. We ask that you can download it to your smartphone, or you can have it right on your desktop at home. We ask for you to complete it 30 minutes before your student arrives at school, or 30 minutes before they get on the bus. If they are riding a school bus, they should get that completed. It's a very simple way to check that your student is going to be at school, and then do they have any of the signs. There's like 4 questions that is submitted. Then it goes to our staff. Your child's teacher will get it, the office will get it, the school principal will get it. They'll be looking to make sure that all students their families have completed that health check before they're allowed to continue in school that day. If they haven't, you might be getting a phone call to ask you to go through the symptoms with you. So it's a pretty easy way of doing it, but it takes a little practice. Our employees, including me, had to practice how to use it, but once you get used to it, very easy routine to get into. And you can do it for all if you have more than one child in different grades, you can do them all at once. We are also, as Heather mentioned, we're feeding our elementary students in the classroom. And this is because we couldn't figure out a way to have enough room in our cafeterias to keep our students 6 feet apart, which the health department was requiring. So we are having our teachers supervise students eating their breakfast and lunch in the classroom. Then teachers are getting their duty-free lunch while the kids are out to recess. This is part of the federal summer meals program that is continuing. So it is a free lunch and a free breakfast for all students. And you can go to our www.spokaneschools.org /meals, and you can see the meals that are being served for the day. They are prepackaged. Our nutrition staff is putting those together every day. There's also special meals for students with allergies, food allergies. And so those all are delivered to the classroom, the breakfasts that have been ordered, as well as the lunches that have been ordered. For 5th and 6th grade, we are also, if you want, we'll send home with your student at the end of their, let's say you're a student, we'll send home with them their lunch and breakfast for the next day. So that can be pre-ordered as well, so that students have a meal on their virtual day as well. Transportation is also being provided for those students who qualify. We are asking, just like at school, that students wear face coverings. Our transportation provider, Durham Transportation, is thoroughly cleaning the buses in between each run. They've done just a great job and will continue to do that. They are operating the buses with the windows down a little bit to get in fresh air. This was recommended by the Department of Health. So this winter, especially this week, as it's going to get colder, make sure the kids are bundled up warm to ride the bus. The routes can be accessed on our website and stop times. So feel free to just go to our school district website and transportation, and you can see the routes and drop off and pick up times. Our buses are planning to arrive during that 15-minute before school window, so kids aren't having to wait around outside of the classroom, and they're picking them up as well right after school. So there's not any chance to have kids having to stand around for a long period of time. Then there's all the health protocols that the Department of Health has asked us to do. And I'm going to ask Becky to cover a few of these very important ones that we have found students really adapt well to. Our teachers are teaching these during the first week or two of school, but students have done just a great job. So maybe we could start with face coverings, Becky, and what type are recommended that the parents send their students with.
Sure. So really, we're looking for students to wear cloth face masks like we see everybody out and about wearing now. They can also use disposable surgical masks. And if your student forgets their mask or loses it during the day, we do have a supply of surgical masks in our buildings for students to have. They can also wear, and this has changed a little bit, the guidance is fluid. They can wear gaiters if they are 2 layers of fabric. So that's been a big ask this fall, and just know that your student can do that. Students also have the option of wearing a face shield. The piece of information you'll want to know about that is if they're wearing a face shield, it needs to have the skirting at the bottom of the shield. You will see teachers wearing face shields when they are at the front of the classroom. They are able to wear those when they're providing instruction, and they are at the front of the classroom away from the kids. And that's so the students can see their face and see their mouth when they're talking. And then when the teachers move away from the front of the classroom, they need to put their face mask back on. And so as far as students who struggle with this, with wearing masks and keeping it on, I know that we plan to provide a lot of reinforcement, a lot of modeling of that behavior, and they're going to see the little kids who've already been there doing this and doing it well. And so we'll just work with the kids who struggle with this, and we'll get it all sorted. They're good at it, I think, by now.
And Becky, what about eating lunch with the face mask? How have we trained our students to do that?
So they do what everybody thought would be impossible, right? And so in between bites when they're chewing, they just they're taking that mask down, with the loop over the ear, just taking a bite or a drink, putting it back on, and then that's when they chew. And it's just something that even our kindergarten students are doing really well. It doesn't create the mess that we thought it would. So I think we'll have a lot of success with the older grades.
Very good. And then hygiene practices. I know we've also been having our teachers teach about this. What are some of the hygiene practices students will learn?
Well, we always want them to wash their hands and become good hand washers, but we're really emphasizing that this year with our students. So they're washing them at the beginning of the day, before they eat, after they eat, before they leave. We also have hand sanitizer in all of our buildings that students can use. Students can also bring hand sanitizer from home. We do know that we have students with sensitivities, and we want to acknowledge that. So parents may choose to send hand sanitizer that they know their student can use. We do make sure that staff is observing and monitoring the use of hand sanitizer so that it is a safe practice. And our custodial staff, I can't say enough about the amazing job that they do already, cleaning all of our high touch surfaces and keeping our classrooms clean. Anytime that we have any suspected or confirmed cases in a classroom, they jump in and do an enhanced cleaning. And again, they work day and night to keep our classrooms clean.
And then social distancing. This has been one of the rules that the Department of Health has not wavered on, about having students 6 feet apart, both in the classroom, in line, at recess. And Becky, why the 6 feet?
So really, it's just how far those droplets travel. So we feel really good that if you're at least 6 feet away from somebody, that if you cough or sneeze, or you're speaking loudly, that those droplets are not going to travel beyond that. So we find that to be a safe distance, particularly when wearing masks.
We have set up our classrooms so that the desks that students will be sitting 6 feet apart while they're in class all the time. As Dr. Swinyard said, our class sizes at grades 5 and 6 were such that we couldn't fit that many desks in a classroom. So having, 10 to 15 students at a time in our 5th and 6th grade classrooms, we can accommodate having students 6 feet apart. You will also see if you come into our school, that we have what you see in the grocery stores, the circles or dots that at places where students would typically line up for recess, line up for going to the office, those types of things. So we are working with students. With our younger ones, I know that Mr. Price caught some of how the teachers were teaching them, that some had ropes with knots in them that were 6 feet apart. I think probably our older kids, we will not have to use that technique, but we will be teaching our kids to still stay 6 feet apart, even when they're moving from their regular classroom to the music classroom or to the art room or those types of things. So that's an important rule that the health department really has emphasized with us about keeping kids 6 feet apart. When you arrive at school, you'll see also there are markers for student drop-off and pickup, and you'll see some signage out in front of schools about, so we'll ask you to also be good role models, parents, by keeping your family together and 6 feet apart from other families as well. So then there's signs of COVID. Becky, you want to talk about what we do when we have a sense that some staff member or some student may have come in contact or may have signs of COVID themselves?
Yes, so it's again very, very important this year in particular that we don't have staff and students in our buildings while they're not feeling well. And so we really are depending on our partnership with parents, first of all, to keep your kiddos home, even if they just have a runny nose. We really need to have everyone staying home and resting when they're not feeling well. And so if your student does start having symptoms while they're at school, they will be sent to the health room, and my nursing staff will assess them there. And we will, of course, ask you to come and pick up your student, and they will wait in the student waiting room for you to arrive and take them home from school. And so for them to return, we need one of 3 things. So we either need a note from your provider saying that your student does not have COVID. We need proof of a negative COVID test, or if you choose to not have your student tested, your student needs to stay home 10 days from the start of their symptoms. And so we monitor that at the building level. If your student does test positive, we then, of course, contact trace, and we make sure that if anybody has been in our buildings who has tested positive, that we notify everybody who may have had contact with your student or with whoever has tested positive. So we, again, are really monitoring this closely this year. And that is how we're keeping our kids safe while they're in our buildings.
Becky, I know that you and your nursing staff have been doing this contact tracing, and that our teachers now are keeping seating charts on purpose to help your staff know who to contact. Is that right?
Yes, so very important part of the contact tracing process is knowing where all of the students in the classroom sit. We also do the same thing with the bus routes. So the bus drivers are keeping seating charts for students on the bus, just because contact tracing is not just confined to the classroom. We also look at who kids were sitting next to on the bus. And so knowing exactly where they're at keeps us from having to quarantine entire classrooms full of kids if we do have a positive case.
And Mr. Price, I understand even at recess, we're keeping a classroom set of students together. Is that right? They go to a certain area of the playground, or?
Yes, each one of our elementary schools has a designated play space, and grade levels get to rotate through those. So we keep that classroom cohort of kids together, whether they're out for a morning recess or a lunch recess or afternoon.
And again, that goes back to helping our nursing staff on contact tracing so that kids aren't intermingling and we know exactly where kids have been. So I know that we have had our communications department. Sandra Gerard is our director of communications. And after this evening's webinar, Sandra, can you describe some of the training videos that we'll be sending out?
Great. We'll be going over the videos that we'll be sending out today is face coverings, health check for students, hand washing, physical distancing, and this great video called A Return to School. It's an amazing video. It's about a minute long or so that really details what it's like when you show up to school and when you go home. I would really recommend that you watch these with your students. They're about a minute long and student friendly. So you will be receiving these today after we send out the postcard. You'll have links to them to make it easy for you.
And Sandra, am I right? Is that health check for students? That's the little training video on how to put it on your phone or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So all the information that you just learned about, it'll be a quick and easy guide on the postcard just to click on the links.
So Mr. Price, the first day of school in person always is a big day for elementary kids. How's it going to be a little different this time?
Well, it'll be a little different in a few ways. 5th and 6th grade parents will notice, if they haven't been to the school already, that when we drop off kids in your designated elementary drop-off zone, that we're asking you to say goodbye outside of the school. Where normally on a first day of in-person learning, you'd be able to go in, maybe say hi to some of your friends or former teachers. We're asking that those students be dropped off outside, and staff will be there to greet students and make sure they make it into their classroom. We're also asking you to help us be good role models. Dr. Anderson mentioned it before, as far as social distancing and face coverings. We have so many people coming to the building for the beginning of the day. We're asking that you do your best to keep that 6 feet of social distance, to role model for our younger children, and to wear those face coverings for us.
So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Heather Bybee, who will serve as our moderator. And Heather, I know we have a little time left. Are there questions you'd like to direct to various members here of the panel?
Yes, we do have a very robust question and answer session going there. So there's lots out there. I'm going to first attend to a few that were emailed prior to starting tonight. So this one I am going to send towards Dr. Swinyard, and it's asking, when will 5th and 6th grade students have the ability to return full time, and what are the things that you are looking at to take that into consideration?
Yeah, so a couple things. When will 5th and 6th graders return full time? So as I referenced, one of the primary reasons that they're on a hybrid schedule is to mitigate the total number of kids on campus at any one time, and to ensure that we follow the 6-foot social distancing requirement. And so I've seen some of the questions in the chat where they've said, like, well, why don't you bring in portables, and why don't you use the lunchroom and the gym? And those are all really good questions. Portables are very expensive, and they're almost impossible to get your hands on for the number that we would need in order to add enough 5th and 6th grade classrooms to get the class sizes down small enough where you could meet the 6-foot social distancing requirement. When the 6-foot social distancing requirement goes away, then that would then enable us to return to a full-time schedule. So that's the guidance that we're waiting on from our health officials. And then one of the other things that I've seen in the chat, Heather, is just a lot of questions about the safety protocols. Well, what do you do at recess? That, maybe are you sure that's going to work? And what are you going to do about the desk arrangement? And is that going to work? And what about eating at lunch? And is that going to work? And what we would say to that is, when we look at the data that we've had kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, and now 4th grade attending. That's over 8,000 students across our 34 elementary schools. And we've had 8 confirmed transmissions since October. And so that's a very low occurrence rate of transmission inside of our schools. So based on what the data shows us, is that those mitigation strategies have been effective. And one of the questions we get is, well, how do you know that? How do you know how many cases you've had? And we have a team of contact tracers that Becky leads, and they literally work 7 days a week nonstop. Anytime we hear about a confirmed positive case, they contact trace until they found an epidemiological link. And of all the confirmed positive cases that a staff member or student has had, and we count a confirmed positive case if they step into our school for 5 minutes or 5 hours, we count and report that as a confirmed positive case in our schools. Her team has found the epidemiological link for all of those cases, 100% of those cases. Of all those cases, only 8 have had an epidemiological link where the transmission occurred inside the school. So certainly there's no such thing, and our health officials have been clear, there's no such thing as a no risk environment. But schools, based on the data we have in our district and across the country, is that when you follow the mitigation strategies, schools are a low risk environment. In fact, you're hearing that from the CDC, you're hearing that from the Department of Health, and we're hearing that from our local health district.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. There's a few questions regarding transportation. So how do families get signed up for bus ridership if they are new to it? If they use, same place as last year, do they just get picked up on the normal route? Can you address some of those questions?
So those are all available on our website at www.spokaneschools.org/transportation. If you're new to the area, there's a link there on how to get signed up, and also a phone number to call if you have questions. I would check the routes and times. They may not be the same as they were last year because we're running a different schedule this year. It's a little bit shorter day schedule. So I would encourage families, if your student rode the bus last year, to go in to the website or call our transportation department and make sure you know when the estimated time is for pickup and drop off.
Thank you. Becky, obviously we've talked about contact tracing. Can you speak a little bit to our testing protocols that the district has available?
You mean our clinics, our testing sites?
Testing sites, yes.
Yes. So we do provide COVID testing now. We have 4 sites that are up and running. So we test at Chase Middle School, Shadle High School, Linwood Elementary, and Grant Elementary. We have testing in the mornings and in the afternoons. And at Grant, we also test on Saturdays. And we have results back about 48 hours after we ship the tests. Depending on the load at the lab that we send them to. So they are a PCR test, which is the gold standard. And we are able to really provide that service to families who maybe are having a hard time accessing testing. And this is a way that if your student is not feeling well and they have not been exposed to COVID, we can get them tested and back to school rather than having them out for 10 days. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Clinton, you're getting the question of the night. It's the AB schedule. It is, if I have a student at multiple levels, are they all going to be on the same schedule? What if I don't want them on the same schedule? Because there are some who maybe don't want their siblings home at the same time, and some that obviously it would make sense for the family if they were all routed on the same days.
That's a great question. We are beginning our schedules with the ideal that many families will be on the same AB rotation. There could be some cases with your individual school based on programming where the school touches base with you to differentiate that AB rotation for your family. Any questions related to AB and whether your student is on AB? Because I've seen a lot of questions coming through the chat about that as well. Your building should be notifying you individually whether your student is on the A or B schedule. That also really quick goes to a couple questions where folks heard that we're starting the 17th, but they've already received notice their student starts on the 18th. That is due to that AB rotational schedule. Our A students will be starting on the 17th, and that first B rotation will start the next day on the 18th.
Yeah, and I would add, I've been in communication with both middle schools and high schools, and they really are working to problem solve family by family, case by case. As you can imagine, if your 5th grade student is a B student, and then depending on your middle and high school students' scheduling, trying to make sure that we are providing the best experience both for the kids at home on their remote days as well as the in-person days. So know that those leaders are in conversation together, but by all means reach out to them and let them know your interests. So when they're problem solving, they have that front of mind. with that, I'm going back to Becky. So what's the protocol if a student has a sick sibling? So, you know, the fifth grader's not sick, but the third grader's home with fever.
Mhm. And that's a really great question. And just want to preface what I'm going to say by we're following Spokane Regional's guidance on this. And right now, because the case counts in the county have been high recently, we are actually keeping kids home if they have a sick sibling. And that's something that the nurse at your building will walk you through if that becomes an issue. Hopefully that guidance will ease up a little bit as our case counts go down in the county, but that's a great question. And yes, we're looking at all siblings out right now.
Dr. Anderson, can you speak to the changes we made for our HVAC systems and how our ventilation meets the guidance that we've received?
Right, so our facility staff, we actually have a team of energy management system control folks that actually can change the settings on all of our heating, air conditioning units. We've been running extra flow to meet the health department guidelines of flushing daily, and the volume of air that we've been bringing in and out of our buildings have met that new standard. So we are spending a little extra money for the health protection of our staff and our students by working our heating and ventilation system so that the airflow does meet the new standards that are being required.
Thank you. Dr. Swinyard, so it's a series of questions. It is, I have a student who has been remote in SBA, but would now like to return. And I have students who have been working with their neighborhood school who would like to stay remote for the year.
Yeah, so in August, we communicated to our families that if they didn't feel like they were going to be comfortable returning to our schools at any point during the year, that we really encourage them to go to our Spokane Virtual Academy. And in fact, we had over 2,000 students make that choice. And in August, we had guaranteed enrollment. Since that time, we've done everything that we can possibly do to accommodate requests for families that want to move into our virtual academy. Now being over halfway through the school year, we're not able to accommodate those requests at the same rate that we were before. It's currently based on space available, but we are starting to see quite an influx of families from our virtual academy now wanting to go back into our neighborhood schools. So we have some families that want to go from our neighborhood schools to the virtual academy, some that want to go to the virtual academy back to their neighborhood schools. And we're going to do everything we can to accommodate those requests for either of those programs. But it's at this point in the year, it's based on space available. And we totally understand how a parent was feeling in August. A lot has happened since August, and we know more than we did in August. So we certainly understand the interest, and we're doing the best we can to accommodate that at this late point in the year.
Clint, can you speak to the types of supports that are available at schools for kids? So if they are nervous or anxious or fearful about the school environment in terms of COVID and its impact, what's there that parents can know to reach out and say, hey, can you make sure that my son or daughter's connected with this?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you at first, we always suggest you reach out to your classroom teacher when you have any questions or concerns about your kiddo. But we are focusing on the social emotional aspect of the learning environment with all of our students as they roll back in. We know it's been quite a while since our 5th and 6th graders have been in that school environment. So we know that you might be a little bit nervous upon that return. So every classroom will be addressing those issues with their classroom. We also have school counselors, just like we always have. And we encourage you to reach out to the school counselor. The student continues to be a little bit nervous about that return or some of the environmental pieces. As always, the biggest thing is, again, reaching out to the teacher, reaching out to the counselor, reaching out to the principal of that building.
Thank you. Becky, back to symptoms. Is there a way for a family to designate if their child is allergy prone so that it doesn't get cross-referenced as COVID?
Oh, and that's a great question. And it's one that we've dealt with already this year. So that is a communication that's important for you to have with the nurse in your building, because the teacher, the nurse, we should be aware of what is normal for your student. And absolutely, that is a conversation worth having. And obviously, once you've had it, with the building and with the nurse, we would not continue to assume that it was anything other than allergies. We want to know your students' health conditions and work with you to make sure that we know what those are and that those are not COVID symptoms.
Thank you. Adam, can you address what are we doing? What are the considerations we're making to keep our staff safe? There's several questions in the chat asking about vaccinations for staff and what are the protocols that are keeping staff safe?
Yeah, so we've done an extensive amount of work to train our staff, provide them resources. Every school has a COVID supervisor that monitors fidelity to those trainings. Typically that is the building principal. And then we have our central office team working with them on a daily basis to make sure that they have the supplies, the resources, the personal protective equipment. We have cleaning caddies in every single room to support sanitation strategies. So we put a number of things in place to help them keep themselves safe as well as keep students safe. And again, going back to the data, what does the data say based on the thousands of children we've had in our schools and the hundreds of staff members? We have about 100 teachers per grade level. So we've had K-4 students now back, kindergartners since October. So we look back and say, what does the data say? The data says that transmission has been extremely rare. We've only had 8 confirmed cases of transmission since October. And so what that tells us is it's reflective that those mitigation strategies have been successful. Not perfect, not zero risk, but they've been effective to keep it a low risk environment. We have been advocating for our staff to be moved up in the vaccination timeline. The governor and the Department of Health recently updated the distribution protocols and groups, and staff's eligibility has been moved up in that. So we are hopeful that they can be inoculated soon. Our staff that are over the age of 65 and over the age of 50 in multi-generational households are going to be vaccinated this week by our school staff. So we're excited for that to happen, as well as staff that work with students in special programs that may not be able to wear a mask due to their disability. So we're advocating that staff be prioritized, and we're hopeful, as everyone is in our community, that we will continue to have availability to the vaccine, but we all recognize that has been unpredictable up to this point.
Thank you. This one is going back to Becky or to Sandra. And it is asking, can you explain the communication protocol if there's been an exposure in the class?
You want me to take that one, Becky? So after contact tracing is done, Becky sends me a message to send a letter to staff and families, and we do that within 24 hours of finding out that there was a positive case in the classroom or in the building. And then on Friday, it gets put on the dashboard.
Thank you. Clint or Dr. Anderson, is there anything families need to help their 5th and 6th graders with in terms of walking and biking protocols, in terms of where they put their bikes or things like that they need to have those conversations prior to next week?
Well, if they're walking, we would again encourage them to socially distance, stay 6 feet apart as they're walking to school. Same thing on a bike. We are providing our bike racks for students, and just asking students to kind of wait, I think, Clint, until the person's got their bike put in and then they can come and put theirs in. Is that the way it's working?
Yep. Yeah, maintaining the 6 feet of distance is kind of the key there. The other thing we'd ask families is just to review the regular safety protocol for your student, whether they're riding the bike or walking. A lot of our communities may not be used to students being out and about and walking en masse to school and back. So we just make sure that we review the looking both ways and watching out for those commuters as they're heading to and from work.
And certainly wearing their mask while they're coming to and from school. And during cold weather, it's a good way to stay warm too.
Dr. Anderson, while I have you, can you talk to the cleaning protocols that happen at night?
Yes.
So what happens?
So cleaning has become a team effort between our custodians and our teaching staff. So we are having our teaching staff once a day. We provided them a cleaning caddy. It has appropriate cleaning material that is meets all the standards as far as not being too harsh, like type of cleaning types. But our teachers are actually cleaning the students' desks once a day. Our custodians then are thoroughly cleaning the classrooms from mopping to vacuuming, plus all of the high touch areas, pencil sharpeners, light switches, doorknobs, so forth. They're doing all of that in the evening and replenishing the cleaning supplies for teachers in the evening. During the day, our day custodians also are hitting all the high touch areas, the front doors, the office doors, all of those things where students may have touched. They're doing that multiple times. So we have actually, we had to make reductions in our custodial staffing a couple years ago due to budget cuts. We are restoring custodians back to the levels they were 3 and 4 years ago, so that all of our custodians are at a certain site. They don't have to travel between sites, and we're making cleaning as one of our high priorities. So it's had a real emphasis. We've trained our custodians. Just today, we were training 5th and 6th grade teachers about how to use the cleaning caddies to clean their students' desks in between each day's use. So it's a big emphasis.
So with that, Dr. Swinyard, we just have a minute left. We've answered over 100 questions in the chat, but there have been, between what was emailed in, what's been asked, several hundred questions. But is there a parting word that you would like to share with 5th and 6th grade families as they take this on next week?
Yeah, just that this is really challenging, and we recognize it's a lot to get accustomed to, and even just in the chat, it's very clear that there are some of you that think this is a great plan and you're enthusiastic. There are some of you that think that our schools should stay closed and then we should remain virtual. There's some of you that think that we should be fully open and return our kids back. And again, we're going to operate our school district the way that we have always operated our school district, and that's based on the guidelines of our health officials. And we recognize that the hybrid schedule is going to be another adjustment for your student. And we also recognize that, as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be some of you that feel like, well, why can't the kids be live when they're at home and have live instruction while they're at home and in person? And again, our school district went through a planning process with a very large group that involved educational experts. The research is really clear that being in person has an enormous benefit to kids for multiple reasons. We've consistently said we're going to get our kids back into our schools as quickly as we can and as much as we possibly can. And that's the rationale for this hybrid model. And in doing that, we've done our research and our exploration. And we believe that this model that we're going to utilize is going to put your students and our teachers in the best position to be successful. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have additional questions to any of our panelists this evening. We're happy to spend more time with you. We apologize for those of you who asked questions that we didn't get to tonight. And we look forward to you working with your teacher, your principal, or any of our district office leadership to put you in the best position to be prepared and your student in the best position to be prepared, as well as answer as many questions as you can. We're not always going to agree, This pandemic has been very reflective of that. But the more we communicate, the more we share each other's rationale, the more that we seek to understand instead of be frustrated, the better position that we're going to be as a community to move forward and make it through a really, really difficult moment for really everyone in our district and our community. So again, thank you so much for your time tonight. We wish you well in the days ahead, and we appreciate all that you do for your student and all you do to support our school district. Thank you and have a great night.
Hey, thanks, everybody.